GitOps with Raziel Tabib.
The Azure DevOps Podcast is a show for developers and DevOps professionals shipping software using Microsoft technologies. Each show brings you hard-hitting interviews with industry experts, innovating better methods, and sharing success stories. Listen on to learn how to increase quality, ship quickly, and operate well. And now your host, Jeffrey Palermo.
Welcome to the show. I'm Jeffrey Palermo, your host for helping you and your teams move fast and deliver quality and to run your software with confidence in Azure, all while using everything that the .NET ecosystem has to offer. The podcast is sponsored by ClearMeasure. ClearMeasure is a full-service software architecture and engineering firm serving companies building mission-critical software systems, and they're also the North American consulting partner for Octopus Deploy, bringing the best of DevOps to .NET software teams. Quick announcement, we are into the second year of my architect forums. You can sign up for them on the website. If you lead a software team and are looking to collaborate with peer architect leaders, other people who are also leading software teams, then you can just sign up. I'll also put a link in the show notes. And for those of you who are looking for Programming with Palermo, my video podcast, you can just search for it in any of the podcast directories and you'll be able to find it. And my guest today on the show is Raziel Tabib. He is a senior vice president of Codefresh at Octopus Deploy. He's an entrepreneur, technology enthusiast, and software developer at heart. He's the original founder of Codefresh, and he's passionate about accelerating the way software is disrupting our day-to-day life by simplifying the way we deploy applications. Raziel, welcome to the show. How are you, sir?
Hi, I'm good. How about yourself?
Very good. Very good. I'm so excited to have you on the show. I heard just a little bit about the announcement of Codefresh joining the Octopus Deploy team, and I want to ask you about that. But we've got so much to cover, and we haven't really dove into just the general topic of GitOps here yet on the Azure DevOps podcast. But before we get into that, can you back up a little bit? Do you remember, when did you first get interested in this industry challenge and decide to jump in and say, you know what, I see something and I can make a difference in the industry? Do you remember when that was?
Yeah, I think it's going back almost about 14 or 15 years. So in my background, I've been always a software engineer. And I think that I was building code, was building testing tools for softwares. And I realized that the role of the software developer has evolved over the time. And when I graduated from university, back then software engineers were mainly writing code.
Yeah.
Someone else was testing the code, someone else was deploying the code, and so on. And I think that as we have gotten more mature in software development, the role of the developers has been evolved and grew more horizontally. So, you get more responsibilities. It's not just about writing code, but you're also responsible for writing a good code. So you should also write tests to test your code. And, you're also in charge of now how the code is running and the quality of the code in production and so on. So the role of the developers grow very much horizontally over the time. And I figure that our life is going to be different as software becoming more and more prominent in our life. And I wanted to see how we can really make the building of software easier and simpler. So I think that I was working in Hewlett-Packard after they acquired the company that I worked for, building testing tools, Mercury. And I remember back then I had to the one who ran the business unit, and I told him, listen, I know we're focusing on building software for QA, but I think developers are going to be the roles that are really going to change and take more and more responsibilities, and we should focusing on building something that can make developers' job easier, can make the building of software easier. That's where we start looking and shifting more for helping developers and building platform for developers from just focusing on quality. And that was the time when I think, for me, it realized that something fundamentally different should be done in how we can deploy software. Up until then, we were pushing software once in release every 6 months or every 12 months. And we realized that that's not the right cadence of pushing software if you want to drive innovation. We wanted to see how we can make the deployments way more frequent. But as we were doing that, okay, we want to do it frequent, but we don't want to compromise on the quality of the software in production. So bring in a platform and a technology that allows organization to move fast, but in the same time, not to jeopardize the production, not to impose risk in production was something that I thought needs to be reinvented. And that's actually was the time in which I was thinking about leaving and founding Codefresh. And then, yes, since then, 13, 14 years of building really a platform that can help building software, building application, doing it in the latest and greatest technology, which is Kubernetes and containers. Along this time, about 14 years of building Codefresh, we've seen that not only the practices are changing and the role of the developers is evolving, but also the technology has been evolved to support this cadence of deployments. We were moving from VMs into containers. Application has over time changed from being by default monolithic application to being microservices type of an application. So this whole evolution of yes, if we build it in a microservices architecture, we're actually allowing organization to scale and to build software faster because everyone has its own microservices that build. Kubernetes became more and more mature and now is actually becoming a de facto operating system to build application on. And recently we're actually seeing that the next is actually also the process, GitOps, becoming the standard way of how to deploy application into Kubernetes. So yeah, this is I know I'm sharing a lot in 2 minutes, but yes, I think it started for me with seeing the role of the developer evolving and the role of software in general in our life. And that was where my passion to build platform that will be an enabler for these changes started.
And you've been focused on this problem a long time. And I think it shows. Our listeners know well Agile and DevOps, but what is GitOps and how is it different, the same? Let's start with what is it?
So I'm glad you mentioned Agile. I think Agile was the first change in our processes, in our day-to-day to enable these frequent releases, right? Rather than doing waterfall and setting up requirements and do that in a 6 months to a year, how we can do it in a sprint, much faster iterations on building software. And I think that on top of building these processes for the team to collaborate, write user stories rather than spending a lot of time on requirements and so on, the deployment processes has to be adjusted to. So how we can, safely deploy software and make sure that we're minimizing the risk. And I think, I'm going to talk about two practices. GitOps is one of them, but also, progressive delivery, which is blue-green and canary deployment that goes side by side with this of how we can do it much more frequently, but also minimize risk. But GitOps, in a sense, it's part of, we talked about the role of the developers, and one side effect of it is that since the developers are looking now more horizontally, we can see that almost every aspect of the software development is now being stored in code in Git. Not just the application code is stored in Git. We've also seen infrastructure as a code. So also, how we want to provision an infrastructure and the description of the infrastructure is being stored in code. And GitOps is part of that wave. Now, actually, we described in Git exactly the all the Kubernetes resources. Our application configuration is all being stored in Git. And Kubernetes has been built in a way that it really enabled GitOps because every resource in Kubernetes can be easily described in a YAML file. So since it can be easily described in a YAML file, Git is a natural place to store the status of my Kubernetes. And since it's a natural step to store the status of Kubernetes, it's also, because it's Git and it's version control, it's easier in Git to track all the changes, to see all the history of what has changed in production. Now, seeing all the history is critical because we're making changes so frequently. So I want to be able to see what has changed if something breaks up and being able to roll back. But GitOps is not only about tracking all of these changes in GitOps. The beauty in GitOps is that the changes to the code drives automatically the changes to the application. So in order to change my application in production or in staging or in development, I'm making a change to the source code. And like, this was the current state, but now this is the desired state. This is my desired state of the application. And GitOps will automatically look at the desired states and move the current state of the application to the desired state. So in order to be in a very like traditional pipeline of a CD that you basically says, do these steps, after that, do these steps, after that, do these steps. In GitOps, I'm just changing, this is the new desired states of my application. And GitOps will do the magic to basically take the current state and make the changes to move the application to the desired states, which is an amazing, make it very simple. But there is also additional benefit for it. After GitOps is moving the application to the desired states, it's constantly monitoring the application. So if someone is making a change to this application that is not through the Git, through the process, GitOps will immediately kind of notify us, there's some changes here that is not tracked. Someone made a changes, which again, it's super important because especially when we, something happened in production, you want to understand what's going on. So it can help you prevent changes to happen to your production if it doesn't come through Git. So every changes has to come through Git. But if someone made a change, it still notify you now your application in production is not in sync with Git, which means some changes happen that is not tracked, that doesn't go through the to the standard processes. And it takes your attention. You can see if you approve this change, then you're going to make the change in Git. If not, you can revert back to the desired state. So I think in today's, again, when every organization out there strive to push the envelope and deploy software as frequent as they can, because I think every company in every industry differentiate by how more innovative they are and how the software is better and so on. So when I'm trying to push the envelope, GitOps is really kind of giving them the confidence that they can stay on top of the of these frequent changes. They can have a control of how these changes are happening, making sure they're all through Git. They can roll back to previous changes if they need. They can identify the root cause of an issue very fast because basically all the changes are being tracked. And again, I mentioned that this goes hand in hand with progressive delivery, because another aspect of how to minimize the risk of changes in production is to apply a progressive delivery practice, whether it's Canary or Blue-Green deployment, which basically what it says is rather than changing once the versions or the applications in production for everyone, I will roll these changes gradually. I will roll these changes first for like 10% of my traffic. I will monitor how that works. And if it works well, I'll roll another 10%, or it's really customizable. But at any point of time, if I see that something goes wrong, the progressive delivery technology will basically automatically roll back the changes and will notify, listen, as I was rolling out this progressively, I've identified that there was an issue, and now I rolled it back automatically. So that's another level of confidence organization can get when they really want to make changes very frequently and push the envelope in how fast they innovate.
So it sounds like there's a bit of overlap with the concept of infrastructure as code. Where exactly is that overlap? You mentioned creating the resources automatically, which for infrastructure as code has been a term that's been used for a while. Did this supplant it, replace it, use it?
It complements it.
Okay.
I think that infrastructure as a code talks about the one layer below the applicative layer, the configuration of the application. So if you're thinking about it, there's like 3 layers of the code that we keep in Git. There is the base layer is the infrastructure as a code that basically tells you, what to provision, how many clusters, how many nodes, really going on the infrastructure level. On top of it, there is the GitOps, the Kubernetes layer that tells you, okay, after you have provisioned this infrastructure, now these are the images, the Docker images that you will roll out. These are all the configurations, the replica sets, and so on. All of the things that you put on top of these clusters. And then the higher level is the code itself, that this is what's been packaged in these images, that the application code. So I think there's 3 layers that complementing each other that goes hand in hand, because basically it allows organization to store everything in Git, the infrastructure, the configuration, and the applications, which again is also linked to how, since developers is now more horizontal developers, the tool of choice for developers is Git, is the source code. So now everything is stored in Git. It makes it easier to kind of also manage permissions all in one place for both infrastructure, configurations, and application. There's a lot of benefits of having the system of record basically become Git. The system of record for your applications, for your configuration, for your infrastructure, everything is stored in your source code.
So GitOps as a pattern, is there one canonical place that defines its pieces? Kind of like we have the agilemanifesto.org website that says, okay, this is what Agile is. These are the principles. Is there a corollary for GitOps?
Yes, there is the Open GitOps. I think that's the name for it. Open GitOps. If you go to Open GitOps.dev, so it really defined the standards for Open GitOps, and it really helps kind of understand the principle. But if you really want to, dip your hands a little bit and try out GitOps, there are 2 very popular open source projects that implements these standards or implement GitOps. There is the Argo CD, which is an open, they both are CNCF projects, Argo CD and Flux. These are the 2 most popular implementations of GitOps. We at Codefresh, there is some initiative that we have started, I think almost 2.5 years ago, which is a GitOps certification. It's a very intuitive program that allows you to get the principle of GitOps. Now, there are already 2 tiers of this certification, and we have over 25,000 students that have completed the certification so far. Basically walk you through really the introduction to GitOps, everything on top of an open source. So, all the exercises during the certification is based on an open source, things that you can just, download and play with yourself for free. But again, I think, for me, I remember a moment when we started building the platform. So initially we built a platform about CI and CD, building on containers. And when I've seen that Kubernetes becoming the standards and everything in Kubernetes is described in a YAML that can easily be stored in Git, I remember my aha moment of reading about GitOps, and then says, okay, I want to try this out. I want to see how that works. And I played around with Argo CD as an open source project for GitOps, and it just fall in love. It's so simple, the complex job of pushing code and making changes was always kind of so intimidating for DevOps. DevOps people in the organization always kind of felt like, okay, it's working, don't touch. I don't want to make changes to production.
Yeah.
And then it was, oh my God, to install Argo CD was one command line and it's working. And then, okay, I want to make a change. I make a change to Git and Argo, make the magic using GitOps, and you can see how that's working. You can see it all working, and if not, you can roll back. So I was about 4 years ago, so I just realized that this is probably how most organization are almost going to be the standard of how to deploy application, especially, to Kubernetes. There's always, there are also some initiatives of how to do that beyond Kubernetes, but it was clear that will be for Kubernetes. And I think that coming back from the last KubeCon event, which was 2 weeks ago, if I'm not mistaken, in Paris, the first day, day zero, just before the event starts, is where ArgoCon was. It was, I think, the largest ArgoCon we have ever seen. There were thousands of attendees there, and what was really nice to see, 70% out of them are first-time Argo. So it's still like really picking up. We're seeing the community is growing very fast. If we're looking at some statistics about what are the most popular open source project within CNCF, Argo CD is always there at the top. So yeah, I think it's an exciting time to be in software development, because basically, as a developer, what you like to do, you like to write code. And if we can take this complex problem of deployment and make it so intuitive, so reliable, so scalable, so repeatable, and also something that we can recover from it if something goes wrong, it just makes software development much simpler.
Yeah.
Many thanks to our podcast sponsor, ClearMeasure. ClearMeasure is a software architecture company that empowers clients' development teams to be self-sufficient, moving fast, delivering quality, and running their systems with confidence. Whether starting a new project or developing new technologies or techniques, ClearMeasure sets up your team to deliver world-class results. Learn more at www.clearmeasure.com. ClearMeasure, empowering software delivery. ClearMeasure is also happy to be a sponsor of the video podcast, Programming with Palermo. Watch, learn, and program alongside Chief Architect Jeffrey Palermo. Videos are added weekly and available on syndicated locations supporting video podcast or by visiting palermo.network. Tune in today.
So you mentioned Kubernetes, you mentioned Argo, and also want to ask you about Codefresh. Tell us about Codefresh and how does it relate to Argo, and is it Kubernetes only? Is Kubernetes one of them? What can Microsoft software teams do with Codefresh?
So Codefresh has been built from the ground up to build and deploy software to Kubernetes, to cloud native. And that can be Kubernetes that you install yourself on a data center, or seamlessly connect Codefresh to AKS, which is the Azure Kubernetes service. Seamlessly, I think, again, Codefresh has been built always and focusing on that automation layer. And our customers, many of them are using GitHub as the source of truth for your source code. And I think that Codefresh has been built as a platform that GitHub is really the system of record, both for your source code as well as for your configuration and so on. ACR is seamlessly integrated to Codefresh for the container registry. So as you build the images using Codefresh, we store it in the registry, and then the changes in the registry can drive changes to your application in AKS. So the platform has been really focusing on containers technology. Even the pipelines that we have for CI, we were among the first, if not the first, pipeline that has been built from the ground up using containers technologies and not VM. So every step in the pipeline is basically a container. And there's a shared volume to pass artifacts from one step to the other, and every step is reusable. We've seen our customers, almost 100% of them deploying software using our platform to Kubernetes. I would say that not all of them are using GitOps as of now, because we deploy also using just Helm deploy and pipeline and so on, but we're definitely seeing GitOps becoming kind of a very fast growing process of how to deploy to Kubernetes. And again, we have been working very closely with Microsoft in Codefresh from the very beginning. I'm happy to say that, M12, which is Microsoft Ventures, was among Codefresh investors from the very beginning. We were in all the Microsoft, event. We won a prize in one of the Microsoft developer event. in Seattle. So we've been working very closely with Microsoft. Obviously, the platform seamlessly integrates not only with AKS, but also with Azure DevOps and GitHub and ACR and the whole Microsoft ecosystem.
You mentioned Azure Kubernetes Service. Azure Container Apps is a layer right on top of Azure Kubernetes Service. For Codefresh, do you have to go directly against a Kubernetes cluster, or does it also work with other infrastructure types?
I think to get some of the GitOps fundamentals, it connects to the AKS because you want to see, the pods and the containers and everything that these changes. We can connect also to the layer above, but if you really want to get to the GitOps and the YAML description of the resources, it works very seamlessly with AKS.
Got it. And as final topic before we close up, with GitOps, and we'll include the link to opengitops.dev, the website that kind of outlines the principles there. What does it look like? You mentioned everything is stored in Git, and so our listeners they're used to a Git repository with a Visual Studio solution and the build file to build the software, and some PowerShell scripts maybe in there. But you mentioned all of the infrastructure and the desired state, all of that are files in Git. Is it ideally in the same Git repository as the software application, or is it a separate repository? What's the relationship there?
So it's a very good question, and I would say that there's so many different opinions of how to do that. I would say that typically the application code and application configuration and the infrastructure, typically they're in separate repositories. Okay. But sometimes it can get even more complex than that, because sometimes, you can have a single repository for the application configuration, but each branch can represent a different environment, whether it's development, staging, or production. Or sometimes you have it actually in a different Git repo. You have a lot of flexibility in how to structure it. But I would say if we speaking about the level of infrastructure and application configuration and the application code, that's typically three separate or repositories, not in the same one.
Okay, so we're talking about three in this model, 3 Git repositories.
One can be even more than 3, but I would say I would keep it in a separate repos. Typically it doesn't have to be. One repo for one or more repo for infrastructure, one for configuration, one or more for configuration, one or more for the application. Okay. For the application, you can, again, because naturally our customers are building their application in a microservices, architecture. So also here there is a very controversial conversations, out there whether you want to have all the microservices being stored in one repo or in multiple repo, with the whole concept of having a mono repo or a distributed repo. So I don't think there is a right and wrong approach to how to store it, break it into multiple repos or not. But I would say that with respect to infrastructure as a code configurations and application, you typically keep them in separate repos. For multiple reasons, I would say not. There's likelihood also of having different permission for these, for these repos, as developers have more control over the application code, while not necessarily want to give the same, software engineers team also access to repos about changing the configurations or changing the infrastructure and so on. So yes, that's in a high level, some practices about how to break down your repo structure.
Okay. So what are the most common reasons why this infrastructure repository would have a commit push to it? Now I can imagine if I want to give more CPU or RAM to a particular pod in Kubernetes, well, that's a change. And if the change is coming from a configuration, a YAML file in Git, well, then I'm making a commit. And of course, I can do a pull request process and whatever process to get that into the master branch. Is that a good example? And what are the What are the really, really common ones that are just always going to be there?
So the most common changes in GitOps for application configuration will be changes to the images tags, the images that are running in your production or in the staging environment. Because the way the process works is that we as a software team, we're making a change to the application code. The CI pipeline is basically going to run the test against this code and so on, but eventually is going to package this code in an image and give a new tag to this image and push it to the registry. Yeah. After this image also being tested, scanned for security and so on. Eventually, if you want to take these changes now and update your production with these changes, you have to go to the application configuration in your Git and tell them, instead of running the previous image with this tag, the desired state is actually to run the new image with this tag. And what the GitOps will go, it will go to all of these services, look for the replica set and start spinning up pods with the new images. And the way Kubernetes works is after it spins up all the pods with the new images and it checks that they're all running properly, it will basically take down all the pods that are running the old images. So a common change, again, there can be various changes to the application configuration, but the most common change is about change in the image tags, which basically says there was a change to the application code that I want to run now in production. So there can be other changes, like as you said, I want to change the replica sets from running 4 pods to 5 pods to 8 pods. There can be changes in other configuration and so on. But the more frequent change that happened due to code changes is a change to an image tag.
So with Octopus Deploy, there would be the pipeline and someone would go in and if there was approval necessary, it would be, okay, now go to production. And it would be a click of a mouse and we would say, okay, we're deploying to production. But in this model, someone would open up a YAML file in a text editor and would modify the tag name to be the tag that's the new version that I want deployed to production and would do a commit.
Yeah. At the lower level, that's what's going to happen. So basically, the change is going to result in making a pull request, that this pull request will likely change an image tag. But the way it's going to work is, first of all, you're going to make these changes, perhaps in a pull request in your ID to your dev environment. And then when you want to move it from your dev environment to your staging environment, to your production environment, you're basically going to make a pull request from one branch to the other. So it's going to take that change and make a pull request to another branch or to another repo. But the change that you will actually see when you run diff between the changes is likely going to be a change in an image tag. Now, again, we want to make it very simple, very seamless for the user. So you will still click accept or promote in a regular way, but underline the engine, what it will do, it will basically do what you just said. It will make a commit, make a pull request and move it. Because I think what our mission is basically, in the same way you can think about it, when you move from a car that is like, a gasoline-based car to an electric-based car, I think for the driver, you want to give a similar experience, right? You want to give, like, there is a drive, there is a neutral, there is a reverse. Like, underlying things are working completely different, right? But in our mission is we want to allow everyone to benefit from all the great benefits of GitOps, but kind of do the promotion between environment in a similar way that they were driving a car before that. But underlying, the underlying technology will work in the most, cutting edge processes and technologies of making pull requests, commit, accepting them, tracking all the changes in Git, do the reconciliation of changes, happen that are not in Git and so on.
So that's why the repository has branches for each environment, so that promoting from environment to environment is just a merge from one branch to another, right?
Yes.
That makes sense. And then your tooling on top of it operates Git, but models the pipeline. So you're really conceptually just promoting a version from environment to environment.
Yes. Yes. And then monitoring, obviously, the Argo CD who's making these changes, see that everything goes well, but also allowing you to do a rollback, which is basically results in reverting the version that you have in Git and so on. And yes, providing really the ability to also scale it and so on.
Got it. So that's really interesting. And Codefresh has recently joined Octopus Deploy. I want to close on that. Tell that story. How did that come to be and how is it organized now?
So I think, this is really an exciting time for us. I met Paul, the CEO of Octopus, for the first time in KubeCon in Chicago in November. And I think, we had a great coffee that ended up in us start talking about how much we share the same vision. We basically approach the same problem that we want to help of making deployment, which is a very complex and scary, action. We want to make it seamless and simple for organization. And we realized that we're coming to this from a complementing, position. Octopus have built a platform and has built a very, market-leading platform for VMs, for .NET, for databases, and so on. Codefresh has been built from the ground up for containers and Kubernetes. And what we found is that in almost every organization that we're talking to, every one of the Fortune 500, all these, they have both. They have VMs, they have .NET, but at the same time, they also have this application that they've started building on top of Kubernetes. And this organization were seeking for like an enterprise CD platform that allowed them to drive continuous deployment in a standardized way, in a way that they can govern all of this. They can guide all the standardization. They can minimize the risk. They can monitor it. So I think it's kind of really accelerate what both Paul and I had in mind. We wanted to build that platform, but now when we have these two legs, one leg already in Kubernetes established and so on, one leg that has been already established in VMs, in .NET, in databases, bringing them together can really accelerate the building of this enterprise platform that makes CD simple, regardless of the technology and application that you're building. Then I think what was very nice to see that was important for both Paul and myself is that we were already thinking about the day after. And I think for companies to really succeed, you need to have not just a common vision, but also a common culture and values and so on. And it was great to kind of, have the chat with Paul, meet with the team there, and he met with him and said, like, listen, we want to work with each other. It's going to be a great culture fit, and it has been, the acquisition concluded in March 1st, but we started working a little bit before that. It has been really reinforcing everything that we had in mind. Everyone in Codefresh stays. We all, working together toward that mission, and we're seeing customers coming to us, really happy about this step. First, what our customers are going to say, we come into customer and tell them now, they're asking, are you going to change your focus? Are you going to do something else? But our customers are actually very excited because they say, yes, we start, our customers say, we start building Kubernetes, but we have so many VMs out there. Yeah. We have so many.
Sure.
Now we actually have the opportunity to bring them all into one platform and manage all of these deployments in one platform, and same for the Octopus customers. So I think I know it might be cliche, but it's really typical for us. I feel like it's like 1 + 1 = 3. It's really, it's a no-brainer. Bringing two platforms that helps covers all type of application and technologies together.
Nice. Well, congratulations on the acquisition. You as being the founder of Codefresh, I mean, that's a point of celebration. And it's not an exit for you. It's a next step.
Yes. In fact, this acquisition is a milestone. It's one step in the journey. And as we see that, we're really building what we have both kind of envisioned in mind. This platform that will really make it very simple to build software, to deploy software, and feel part of this like revolution of software that we see in every part of our life.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I know that you have some integration work to do with the two products, but for now, where can .NET teams, where should we point them to learn more about how they can use Codefresh to implement GitOps with their .NET applications?
So our website is still there in codefresh.io, and I think all of our documentations. There are lots of examples there on how to build a .NET application and also deploy and build images with .NET and run them. So I would refer them to look into our website and documentation. It's all there with examples.
Nice. Well, Raziel, thank you so much for coming on the Azure DevOps Podcast and sharing. Yeah, this is great. I learned a ton. It was fun.
Thank you. Yeah, we're very passionate about building software and deploying software.
Fantastic. And until next time, keep shipping.
You've been listening to the Azure DevOps Podcast, a show for developers and DevOps professionals shipping software using Microsoft technologies. Go to www.azuredevops.show for show notes and other episodes. On behalf of your host, Jeffrey Palermo, and our sponsors, thanks for listening, and may God bless you.